Hey there, friends, fans, and foes of Dad Saves America. John Carolla here, and we figured this would be a good Friday to switch things up again and go live to talk about the election, to read some of your comments from some of our videos and recent posts, and frankly, for me to share what I thought was the calculus I personally faced, and talk about that for what it's worth. This show is not fundamentally a partisan political platform. It's not what we're about. It's not what I'm about here on YouTube on Dad Saves America. Just to repeat our mission, this is about how can we raise our kids to thrive in a free society and want to keep it free. There is a philosophical bent to everything we do here, and that shades into politics when politics imposes itself on our lives. But frankly, I wish I had a lot more choices that align with the version of freedom that I believe in, that I think is fundamentally American. Individual freedom, universally applied to every American, and not sliced and diced into different identity groups. And so why don't we start off by looking at a couple comments, and we can have some fun together, shall we? All right, Sam, what do you got for me? Okay. Rick Cleveland, if you think Trump is capable of doing these things, you have your head up your butt. Really and truly, this is going to be fun to watch. Your smiles turn to frowns. So what are these things Rick is talking about? Well, I put up a post in the community note about things, frankly, I would hope that either candidate would do, which is to say, decentralize power, number one, and work real hard to the extent it is possible to bring down the cost of living in real terms, not just borrowing more money and cutting us checks, because that is a temporary sugar rush, but actually get the government out of the way of the things that it currently jacks the price up of. And to the extent government can have a role in bringing prices down for real, great. I'm pretty skeptical of that. I think mostly it's getting government out of the way. But, Rick, you are probably right, my friend. The deal is, all politicians will disappoint us. I have no illusions about that. I don't root my identity in my politics, and so I don't expect miracles. To be perfectly honest, and I'm going to say this, I did vote for Donald Trump personally. This is not an endorsement on behalf of the show or the organization, but as me, John Carolla, I made the choice to vote for him, and also explicitly to vote against Kamala Harris and the Democrats. And that is not because I don't think it's possible to be a good Democrat. It's because, frankly, I was just absolutely fed up with the ideology that has taken root inside of the modern Democratic Party. And that ideology expresses itself in a couple places that I think are reason enough for me to say, not today. Number one, we have seen a concerted effort on the part of the leadership of the Democratic Party to censor systematically, to begin to put forward a kind of European Commission elite technocratic vision of reimagining the First Amendment in the name of controlling misinformation on social media. Hillary Clinton has said this. Barack Obama has said this. John Kerry has said this on the global stage. Bill Gates has talked about this, has lamented. All of these people in different ways have lamented that our First Amendment protections are so strong. They are uniquely strong in the United States, unlike anywhere else in the world. And we have seen, and I've talked about on the show, how special this is, how uniquely American this is. And I can't support a party that goes to war on the First Amendment, the cornerstone of our actual democratic republic. I can't do that. The second piece of the puzzle, and I know this is maybe more controversial, is I had Dr. Eitan Haim on the show. He's a doctor at the Texas Children's Hospital here in Texas. He blew the whistle on the Texas Children's Hospital for performing procedures on minors in the name of gender-affirming care, after Texas Children's Hospital said they were no longer doing such things. And for doing that, for blowing the whistle while maintaining the privacy of the patients involved, the Biden administration's Justice Department went after him, indicted him, has attempted to destroy his life. This is the two-layered thing that I cannot possibly support, and that I pray the Democratic Party will reevaluate in itself. And that is this support in the name of their intersectional coalition of child mutilation, and the active attempt to silence anyone that would call it out, criticize it, or blow the whistle on it being done illegally as it was being done in Texas. I don't understand why the party would want to do this. I don't understand why the Biden-Harris administration would think it makes any sense politically or otherwise to go after whistleblowers for protecting kids. But then again, they also went after pro-life advocates who were exercising their First Amendment rights to protest abortion clinics. They went after we as parents for protesting this very same thing in our schools and called us domestic terrorists. That was enough for me. For all of the problems with Donald Trump, his personality problems, the January 6th, which I think has problems. I am not in the camp that thinks January 6th wasn't a problem. None of that compares to the full-throated assault on us that these two issues represent. And the final piece of the puzzle for me is we have to turn the page on identity politics. The politics of race in this country has gone into weirdo land. And you only have to go back to 2014 to find overwhelming supermajorities of Americans saying that race relations in this country were pretty good to very good. Gallup has done this work. I've pointed this out in other videos. Since the rise of this intersectional identity politics, race relations and perception of them in this country has collapsed, now down to 30% think it's good to very good race relations in this country. I think that that is a disaster, and I think that we aren't yet ready for half of our political elite to confront that. In fact, Sam, can you pull up that Morning Joe clip? There's a clip in the aftermath of Tuesday that I think points out the problems that we have. Let's see how this works.
I just say really quickly, too, Democrats need to be mature, and they need to be honest. And they need to say, yes, there's misogyny. But it's not just misogyny from white men. Mm-hmm. It's misogyny from Hispanic men.
Right.
It's misogyny from black men, things we've all been talking about, who do not want a woman leading them. Might be race issues with Hispanics. They don't want a black woman as president of the United States. You know, the Democratic Party, I've always found when you're sitting around talking, they love to just sort of balkanize everybody into these separate groups and say, oh, white people don't like women and black people. No, it is time for the Democrats to say, okay, and you and I have talked about this before, a lot of Hispanic voters have problems with black candidates.
Right.
A lot
and
of,
with other Hispanics. You got some that don't like each other. And some of the most misogynist things I've heard going on this Get Out the Vote tour came from black men. I mean, misogynist things. So you're absolutely right. It's not simplistic. And we've got to have real honest conversations about it.
Real honest conversations.
All right, let's we'll go back full screen here and talk about that. So... real honest conversations. This is the problem. See, when you start to divide the country and the population on the basis of identity alone, the stuff I can tell about you from across a room. And then you take into account that actually our identities are kind of complicated. So I can be both a man and I can also be Latino, or I can be a woman and Latino, or I can be a woman and Latino and gay, or I can be half of this and half of that. The intersectional philosophy that has been installed as the primary operating system in our elite political left is essentially a snake eating its tail. And you see the head getting almost close to eating itself in this clip. Because instead of saying, hey, you know what? We're all a little bit racist. It's like that. There was a play in Broadway called Avenue Q. And one of the moments in the play is really great. I was going to play this clip, and then we realized we'll probably get a copyright strike and have it taken down. But it's basically a song saying, you're a little bit racist. Well, you're a little bit too. We're all a little bit racist. You know, this is a fact. We are not colorblind people, right? So I don't think the notion that we can be colorblind is true. But I think our discourse and our institutions should strive for colorblindness. And getting into a new form of even more fine-grained struggle sessions in which now we need to browbeat black men for being misogynist and browbeat Latino men for being extra racist towards black people. This is a circular firing squad. And the answer is all men and women are created equal. That is what our American creed needs to be, because we're a diverse society. And so if you are disgusted by that, as a lot of people were, as twice as many black men were than last time, and a majority of Latino men were this time, you look at all of this and you say, I think I'm done with that. I think that's not speaking to me. And I agree with that entirely. I think we have to turn the page on identity politics. We have to start looking at each other as simply Americans, as simply individuals. And I think this is equally true on the right as it is on the left. The left has been way more obsessed with this. The fringes of the right, which is dramatically smaller in numbers and has none of the institutional power of academia and the mainstream corporate press. But there is pockets obsessing about whiteness, and I find that just as disgusting as the far left going all whacked out. But that is some of the stuff that I think fed into this sort of resounding victory by Donald Trump. And it isn't actually that hard to understand. You just have to unplug from the woke intersectional matrix and start looking at people as individuals again. All right, let's see. What else do we got? Charlottetown. Dems and liberals in North America have harmed our children. Children have to be able to grow up making choices for themselves when they are adults. We need to keep politicians out of homes. I agree with this. I don't think it is limited to Dems and liberals. I think that the harm to our children has come from our entire political class. And I think especially this is true when it comes to our schools. So I'm here in Texas, and actually the political victory I'm personally truly excited about, even far more so, frankly, than the presidential election. Although I will say I was totally giddy to see the identity politics crowd get their teeth kicked in. But was actually that here in Texas, super red conservative Texas, we actually had a series of local officials get elected who favor school choice, because as it turns out, school choice is often unpopular in even relatively conservative, smaller regions, like rural neighborhoods where the public school might be the largest employer. And so, or where the community rallies around the football team and the adults like to grasp their football high school rings and can't imagine there being any change to the status quo because they went to this high school and it's good enough for them. This has been one of the biggest problems that our kids face and our families face. When you don't have choice in anything, it ends up being corrupt. and our education system is rotten. So conservatives have been bad on this in many places, as well as liberal Democrats. In fact, when I used to live in New Jersey, Cory Booker was the mayor of Newark, and he was actually super pro school choice. So these issues on an individual basis can cut a lot of different ways. It's not always super partisan. Where I do profoundly agree with you, though, is on the gender issues. The left has gone into absolute psychotic weirdo land on the gender issues. And our kids are facing a serious mental health crisis, especially young girls who face this gender dysphoric confusion in ways that are ahistoric and that are driven by the culture and that have been promoted by progressive left culture. There's a reason why self-identification as non-conforming gender-wise is dramatically higher in California than in Idaho. It's not what's in the water, although I think RFK might be able to do some good things on that front. I hope. All right, what else we got? All right, Zach. School choice is awesome, but as a lower middle class poor person, public school is the only choice I get. Well, that's the point, right, man? That is exactly the problem, is that rich people, like me, can afford to send our kids to private school, or we can afford to move to the neighborhood on the basis of the school of our choice. The whole thing about school choice, which is simply to say, do with school what we do with literally every other government program. So the GI Bill, food stamps, Medicare and Medicaid, all of these fund the person to then go and pick the provider of the service. The GI Bill or Pell Grants or student loans, they don't tell you what school to attend. Medicare, though it does limit some of where you can go to see a doctor, by and large, you can go to just about any doctor in the country with Medicare. It doesn't say you can only go to the government-run hospital, like, say, in the United Kingdom. So what school choice does is simply say, hey, if you want to go or send your kids to a private school or the local Catholic school, the money that the school system was going to spend on your kid in the public school system is going to go to you so that you can use it at the private school. You're being taxed for it anyway. So now you get to actually have it follow you. I think you are the target market for school choice more than anyone else. All right, what do we got? Okay, Penelope. A sincere thank you to all the real men who voted for Trump. May your courage continue to lead our nation in the right direction. God bless you. Well, if you're happy with the outcome, then I totally think that makes sense. Here's the thing. I watched the election. I was pumped when he won because I voted for him. I thought he was the lesser of two evils. Is it courage? I guess in a certain sense, I would say, yeah, it can be courage in this country, depending on where you live and where you work, to even voice your opinion. We have been browbeaten about this candidate being the new Hitler. In fact, for the past month, that's all we heard. We're heading to fascism. We are on the verge of seeing the end of democracy. And I wouldn't pick the other side of the bet on that one. I don't think... I think we're going to have an election 4 years from now. Now, if we don't, I will see you in my jail cell, or maybe I'll be the warden of the prison. We'll see. It depends on how the loyalty goes. But I do think it has become the case that in Fortune 500 companies, and depending on the industry you're in, people are totally fine voicing their approval of left-of-center candidates and feel like they have to hold their tongue for supporting Donald Trump. I think that actually got a little less so this year than, say, 2020 or certainly 2016. But I think the courage comes next, to be honest. And that is, we will be disappointed by him. Because every politician disappoints us. And to the extent democracy is worth anything, it isn't what happened on Tuesday that is the final word on democracy. We need to hold these people accountable at every single turn in every single action. And that kind of sucks because we've got better things to do than worry about what these people are doing in Washington, D.C. But if we don't hold them accountable, if we don't say, hey, Mr. President, where's the GDP growth you promised? Where's the lower prices you promised? Which I think there's some warning signs on that front, on the inflation front, to be honest. The real courage comes in being able to stand up to your own people and say, yes, I'm a conservative, I'm a libertarian, I'm whatever. I voted for you, or I thought you were better than the other guys. You can't just go into constant defensive mode now. And there's actually an interesting reason why it's even more important if you are on the same team to be a critic. And that is that there's this great book by Jonathan Haidt called The Righteous Mind. And in that book, Haidt talks about how groupish we are. And one of the interesting things about criticism and how we take criticism is we do feel like we're under assault when we are criticized by people that we see as being outside of our group or tribe. We just reject it. It's like, I don't trust you. You're on the other team. Even if what you're saying is making sense, I won't believe you. The way we tend to learn is by being criticized by people that we actually broadly see as being in our group. So now is actually the most important time for conservative-minded, liberty types to be critical and careful and hold the new Trump administration to account. Because, hey, we're on your team. We want you to succeed. We haven't been calling you Hitler for the past 4 years. So stick to the program. Anyway, that's my long-winded answer to that one. Let's see what else we got. All right. Evil Murray. Oh, no. Here we go. Dr. Jill wore red on Election Day. I think she was fine with the outcome. It is interesting. I don't know. Everything about this was the weirdest election of my lifetime. I think it's maybe the weirdest election in 100 years. To have a sitting president drop out, to have a vice president installed who, in some ways, I actually feel bad for Kamala Harris. I don't think she was up to this. This really, she wouldn't have made it as far as she did if it was any other process. And of course, as a power-seeking politician, she's going to grab the ring if it's presented to her, or in this case, handed to her on a velvet pillow to be picked up daintily. I think there's a lot of reason to believe that Joe and Jill Biden were really pissed off. And you can kind of see the kind of guy he is in that last press conference where he gritted his teeth and talking about kicking somebody in the rear. He's an angry dude. And I don't doubt that there's some truth in what you're saying, that he wasn't looking to do his vice president any favors. But who knows? Who knows how these people work? All right, what else? The press is supposed to hold them accountable, and since they haven't, it's exhausting for the rest of us. Amen to that. I think that one of the things that's exciting about this election, and that I hope a whole set of other institutions wake up to, is that the mainstream news media is a scam. It is a completely derelict set of companies and institutions. Let me count the ways. Why don't we start with being told that Joe Biden, our president and commander-in-chief in a time of multi-continental war, was sharp as a tack and the best version of himself ever, right up until he got on stage and had to work without a teleprompter. At which point he was immediately kicked out of running for re-election and yet remained in power, which in and of itself is scary. The fact of the matter is, Joe Biden's still the president of the United States and has been deemed unfit. That was maybe the single greatest dereliction of duty on behalf of the press we've had. But then again, it's hard to compare because the Hunter Biden laptop was equally so. The gaslighting of all of us throughout COVID remains a problem that no one has really atoned for. And I think all of these things are what led to the complete and total victory of Team Red this election across the board. Because you can only be gaslit and told you're stupid for so long before you say, I've had enough. I don't know about the problems over here, but I'm flipping you people the bird. And maybe this is just a South Philly in me, but that whole thing is one of the things I've always liked about Donald Trump. You know, I spent a lot of time in Atlantic City. I used to wait tables actually at Trump Castle in Atlantic City. That attitude, it's uncouth. It's not statesmanly, but in this case, it is wholly justified. And I think it's great that podcasts and new media have stepped into the breach. I mean, think about it. We got multiple hours, tens, hundreds of hours of dialogue with at least half of the candidates this election cycle. And hopefully next time, everybody will be on board with being interviewed for 3 hours. This is what it used to be. This is what the Lincoln-Douglas debates were. They got on stage and just went at each other for hours on end. Not tightly edited interviews in which a bad rambling answer got replaced. And we're supposed to trust you people. We don't trust you. You didn't earn our trust. You need to go away. All right, what else? Mech Boss! I was disappointed with his first term. Second run, I was disappointed with who he was surrounding himself with. This is the first time I actually voted for him. So I have really weird feelings about this that are at all kinds of cross currents. I completely agree with you. I didn't vote in 2016. I thought that he was a complete clown that was also a lifelong Democrat in 2016 and was buddies with Hillary Clinton until 5 minutes ago. So all of that added up to, I'm supposed to, what is this? What are we doing here? I voted for him this time. Now, why is it weird for me? And why is it maybe weird for people like me that sort of have a very liberty-oriented view? I really like RFK, even though the things he would like to do involve the kind of government power I don't like. So that's weird. Tulsi Gabbard, I've actually always really liked, but she was like the head of the DNC and was kind of a socialist until 5 minutes ago. And yet I really like her. I've always been a fan of Elon, so I think, but he, you know, he's an edgelord troll on the internet, so that's weird. But I'll tell you a couple people that have really struck me. One is, I think Bill Ackman, the New York private equity sort of super billionaire. He's a really tempered, moderate sounding, and I think reasonable guy. The fact that he came out forcefully for Trump this round, I found incredibly compelling. I think the all-in podcast guys that came around on him, there's a really interesting set of outsiders to politics who have now come together that if you add them up, not in terms of access to really interesting, brilliant people, divergent views, this is maybe the most ideologically diverse collection of people to ever come together in a transition team in American history, or certainly modern post-war American history. And not all of it cuts in my direction as far as, like, if you lay out my libertarian ideology, I don't want the government to be forceful. I want it to get the hell out of the way and leave us alone down the line. J.D. Vance is another example. I think I really am impressed with his intellect and how fast he is on his feet. I think some of the things he talks about as far as how he wants to use government to protect American workers, sentiment's great. Economically, it's identical to Elizabeth Warren. Thumbs down on that. I don't like that. So it's a mixed bag, and it's going to be a bunch of different forces at work that will be duking it out to some extent. And at the center is Trump, who doesn't have a whole lot of ideology or philosophy explicitly supporting how he makes decisions. What he does have, and what I do respect more than just a lifelong politician, is he does know how to build things. And I think it is really hard to build things. And I actually think that the closest you get to a libertarian streak in Donald Trump is the fact that he was a builder and is a builder and built major projects in New York City. Because New York City is a disaster to try to get anything done. It is a thicket of regulations and bureaucracies, the likes of which few people can imagine. Maybe my best friend of all time since 5th grade, my former business partner, Josh, when he moved to Austin, it took him 6 months to get his apartment in Brooklyn on the market. And the reason was, it took 6 months to get approval in New York City to put up a non-load-bearing wall in an apartment that he owned outright. Well, he had a mortgage on it, but nonetheless, that is crazy talk. You shouldn't need to get anyone's approval to put up a non-load-bearing wall in your apartment, but it took 6 months. So I think Trump's hatred of regulations is legitimate, and I love it. It is great. The regulatory state is a monster that we need to abolish at every single turn we can. And if he's got enough guts to start smashing that thing, I'm going to be super happy. We'll see what else comes of it. As if you're a viewer here, you know that I'm practically like a lefty on immigration, and this is the part of the agenda that I find, honestly, the worst version of this does scare me. I don't want tens of millions of people deported. I just don't. I don't think peaceful people that have been here for a decade, who overstayed their visa and have been peaceful contributors that haven't been on the welfare dole, I don't think they should get to vote. I actually don't think any immigrant should be allowed to vote. I think the ultimate compromise on immigration would be to say, you can come here as a first-generation person, you can't change the rules. No voting for you. You get permanent residency. I think that would take immigrants out of the political football that they've been put in. But as we move forward, I literally am saying prayers that there will be some serious forces of humanity that keep the best people who've come here, even illegally, from being sent home to Venezuela if they are good, honest people, earning an honest wage, being contributors to our society. Send back the criminals. If you want to send back the recent people who've hopped the fence, so be it. But I know that makes me a really weird Trump voter. That is what it is. All right, what else we got? Brian Cooley. I remember back in 2020, Michael Moore warned the Democrats not to nominate a woman for president if they want to beat Trump. He's right. Now they're paying the price. Bryce, I think you're wrong. I don't think there's anything about American politics or the American people that stand in the way, fundamentally, structurally, bias-wise, of electing a female president. It just so happens that the Democratic Party has seen it fit to put the most unlikable candidate in modern history, Hillary Clinton, up, number one. And then number two, the most unprepared, unvetted, and perhaps unqualified person, number two. I don't think Kamala Harris lost because she's a woman. I just don't. The UK elected, the UK is not that dissimilar from us. They elected Maggie Thatcher back in the 80s. is America's dramatically more sexist than the United Kingdom? I think not. So I think what's really going on here is the party that's put the female candidates up first is obsessed with nonsense and did a bad job. And it's that simple. And we don't have that many presidential elections, so you only have so many swings at that. I will be first in line, I think, depending on how the next 4 years go, to be on board with a Tulsi Gabbard presidency if that day comes. I know Trump already tweeted that, which was kind of interesting for J.D. Vance. It's like, what do you think about this for the next president? But yeah, I just disagree with you. I'm not saying there aren't sexists, but I just don't think it's nearly as big of a deal as you're suggesting, or Michael Moore for that matter. That's just more identity politics excuse making on his part. How do I talk to my parents who voted for Harris? I voted for Trump for my kids' future, and they don't see why. Well, have an honest conversation with them, I guess, and do your best not to be defensive, even if they're defensive. I think there's a couple things. Number one, even with all of the problems we face as a country, these people don't matter as much as we make it out for them to matter in our lives. They don't. There's huge caveats in that, right? Public policy matters a lot. The massive increase in the cost of living in this country in the past 5 years has hit everyone. It has created a powder keg. The fact that the median home price in this country went from $250,000 to over $410,000 and has stayed there is like society destroying. It is like setting us up for a revolution. And maybe we'll end up getting some comments about why we are not going to have a civil war, like my guest Rudyard Lynch was saying we might in last week's episode of the podcast. But I think you've got to break it down to the issues, and you've got to articulate it as best you can, and don't get defensive, and and then end it with "I love you." We can't let politics rip us apart from our families. It's just crazy. I think if anything, the reason why I feel like the reason why I'm even sharing any of this and my own views on this is because I think it's worth destigmatizing this kind of talk. And I hope that's helpful to you. And I hope your parents get over it. And I hope they're wrong that we will have an election in 4 years and none of the insane hyperbole will come to pass. But if they turn out to be right, we need to be prepared to eat crow from our gulag. All right, what else we got? Jake, I'd like to see the immigration process reformed so we can move legal immigrants through faster and make illegal immigration next to impossible. I think, our episode this week that went up yesterday with Simon, who's a really thoughtful guy. If you haven't watched that, I really recommend you check it out. It's a really good conversation about this topic. I think the important things for us to think about is what kind of crime is this, right? It's a weird one, illegal immigration, because people commit crimes in this country all the time. And this is a crime, technically. Whether it's a moral crime or not is fundamentally kind of a philosophical question. But what should the penalty be? And how do you determine it? And when it comes to other acts that violate the law, we have all kinds of different ways we do that. Should every single person that comes across the border illegally be returned home and deported? Really? Like every single one? I know there's plenty of people who think yes. I don't think we can ever perfectly seal the border. Prior to the past 5 years, where the Biden administration simply decided we are going to undo all of the disincentives to come across the border illegally and functionally actively encourage it, which I think was a disgusting travesty. And I'm a pretty open borders kind of guy, not like eliminate the border legally, but let people come in who are productive. Don't give them any stuff, no free stuff, but let them come in, let them work, let them build businesses, let them build families and lives. That's my default. That looks nothing like the past 4 years. So I agree with you. I think we should have clearer paths to come into this country legally. As I said before, I think it should be harder to vote. You either need to be here a long time or you need to pass some serious tests. I don't want to import a bunch of commies. I just don't. And I don't think you get to come into this country and change the rules. That's not how any other game is played. Somebody shows up to a game of basketball. Hey, I want to join your basketball game. Yeah, come on in. You don't get to change the rules of the game you're joining from the outside. That's not how it works. But as for illegal, it's always going to be a cat and mouse game. And I think it's a really messy problem that will never be perfectly solved. It does seem like the Trump policies, like wait in Mexico, the things that disincentivized human trafficking, which is a real serious problem, I think they were good. I think creating an environment, and you'll hear this in my interview with Simon, where you're encouraged to show up with a kid and swamp the system with kids that may or may not be yours, that is the stuff of nightmares. And that's what's happened in the past 4 years. So we have to address that. And we have to have a humane, justifiable policy on that front. And I hope it's going to be hard to be worse. I just hope we don't overcorrect. That's all I'm saying. All right. What else we got? Are you worried about violence in the coming year? I sure hope not. I'm less worried than I was on November 4th because it was enough of a win that we aren't sitting here today debating the outcome. That I think most of us in America and maybe around the world were on pins and needles that we were going to be, into next week and months to come, uncertain of who the elected president was. So whoever won, I really was hoping it would be enough of a landslide to avoid that battle, and it is. Will there be violence? Well, we've seen that, right? 2020, the BLM riots, billions of dollars of damage to America's cities, many, many people killed. I think the most radical, whacked out places in this country are probably set to erupt into pretty vociferous protests. I don't see a world where that doesn't happen. That's been happening forever. People were calling George W. Bush a fascist with some justification and taken to the streets. We should just all hope that doesn't happen. And I think we should all try our best to ratchet down the rhetoric. Just because I'll just speak plainly, the friggin' scumbags in the media have been gaslighting us, calling us all racists, and saying we're on the verge of Hitler 2.0, doesn't mean we should act that way. We should extend some grace to our fellow Americans. We should put this genie back in the bottle and try to live our lives like normal people. And that's the best we can do to avoid, making matters worse. And that's certainly what I'm going to be doing here at Dad Saves America, and it's what I've always done in my personal life. I have no interest in stoking a civil war in this country. I love America way too much for that. All right. Great show and well-balanced takes on the pertinent issues. Everyone breathe. We're okay. Hear, hear, my friend. I think we are okay. I think the hyperbole has gone way too far. And I don't, this is maybe the most utopian I get. I hope we can do better. I really do. I don't want us to be at each other's throats all the time over things we have no control over. We'll see. I do think it'll be pretty bizarre for the far left not to be chastened by the outcome here, especially the fact that this candidate, Donald Trump, got the most diverse electoral victory from any Republican, I think, in the past 100 years. I think one of the things that says that one of the problems I think we face, and it's a technological, anthropological problem, is that you're watching this through this friggin' black mirror of a digital device. None of the things that constitute, our biological way of socializing are at play. Not literally, there are things about how we smell to each other that provide social information that gets wiped away when you're looking at stuff over a screen. The screens bring out our worst version of ourselves. It brings out the id. And we are early in the days as a species of confronting this and figuring out how to moderate and deal with it. If you go back to the time of Prohibition and the people that were advocating for the prohibition of alcohol, they actually did have a point. There was a real problem of drunkenness and disorder that they were pointing to. Prohibition wasn't the answer then, and it's not the answer now. Prohibition does nothing but produce Al Capones, black markets, criminality, and disaster. But we do have to figure out how to rebalance our lives in relation to our screens so that our psychology can start to heal and so that we can regain some of the humanity that's been stripped away by our feeds. And I think that's where we've got to go. I think that's the thing that has changed. It isn't Donald Trump. It's we are in the early stages of a technological transformation of human society, and it's given rise to all manner of psychopathy and disorder. And we're either going to survive that or we're not. I hope we do. All right, what else? How will Trump save America when he doesn't understand a tariff? LOL, the people there are lost. I kind of agree with you on this. I'm a free trader. A tariff is a tax. It is not paid solely by the company that is selling us the good. That is not true. It is not paid solely by the buyer of the good, but I think tariffs mostly are economic cowardice. I think protectionism sucks and has so many examples of the ways it has harmed and destroyed industries that they are too long to count. American cars are better today precisely because Honda and Toyota came on the scene and forced Detroit to compete. Turning back the tide on that isn't going to make America great again. It just ain't. Now, that being said, what we have on the global stage is not David Ricardo laissez-faire. And I think it is legitimate to look at the legal regimes taking place on the global stage and criticize them, if not smash them to pieces. I came into this political world through Ron Paul, ultra-libertarian, Texan, the greatest of all time, the GOAT, Ron Paul. And Ron Paul, as hardcore libertarian as he was very critical of the global trade regime, saying that it wasn't free trade, it was managed trade. And so I think there is plenty of room to question the current orthodoxies, or at least the current legal status quo when it comes to trade. The European Union gives us, as it often does, all kinds of great examples of how to do things wrong. So the European Commission, which, the Brits exited with Brexit, impose all kinds of crazy rules and regulations in order to be in their free trade zone. It is just a giant regulatory superstructure. It's central planning by McKinsey-type whack jobs. That sucks. That's not free trade. I don't want that. And so I think there is an interesting tension between Donald Trump, who hates regulations on one hand, but has always been, a little backwards from my perspective on trade. You can pull up any video of him from the 80s going on Oprah talking about how we're getting killed on trade, we're getting ripped off. I don't think I'm getting ripped off when I buy a Toyota and it's a good car. I think I'm getting served. Making a Toyota more expensive so I'm forced to buy a Chevy, that's not helping me out. And there are far more people that need to buy a car than anyone building cars. This is the fake out that happens. We think, well, we like workers, we want higher wages, we got to protect jobs. It's like, but any given job, it's not symmetrical that way. It's not like it's not like we can protect our way to all being wealthy. If that were true, then we should impose barriers at the state level. Like if it's not good for us to import cheaper goods and services from places that can produce them more cheaply, why would it be good for us to import cheaper goods from other states? Why not impose tariffs on Pennsylvania from Texas? Why not protect Texas beer from the dreaded scourge of Yingling coming out of PA? This logic doesn't quite hold. But we'll see. We'll see what forces prevail on the trade front. I will say this. If I could somehow trade the income tax for tariffs, I don't think that math necessarily works, but I would take that trade. I think if that was a way to work, if we could do that, if it was a 1-to-1, no more income tax, and we're just essentially creating a tax region, shaped like the federal government, I'd take that trade. All right.
Last one, John. This one's a little philosophical.
All right, last question. Michael. Now it doesn't matter whether you are alive or dead as president. They can now make people do and say whatever they want with video and AI. Take care. Oh no. I hope you're wrong. I think you might be right. Well, we are entering into really uncharted waters. I am kind of a technophile. If you look at my desk here, it looks like I'm operating a starship. If I reach into my pocket and here's the iPhone 16, because I've always got to buy the new one no matter what. What can be done with AI it's the first time I have truly felt the twinge of fear in what a technology could unleash. I say that really honestly. I am. There's enormous promise, right? So I'll start with the negatives. The negatives are kind of obvious. We'll never be able to trust anything we see again. That's already basically true, but it's going to be impossible to tell the difference. It's going to be impossible. So that's going to be really interesting and really challenging. And some of the ways you would try to solve that can be downright dystopian and somewhere between Brave New World and 1984 Orwell, right? Like having everyone biometrically chipped so that any content created by a human is biomarkered in some cryptographic global blockchain hell. Sam Altman has actually talked about doing this and has actually sent orbs around the planet to take retinal scans for the sake of constructing something akin to an identity verification blockchain. That all sounds like a path to hell, and I don't want that. I also don't want to be completely destroyed. So we've all actually put out enough tech. Here's the thing that's so interesting. Early in this, it seemed like those of us that have put our voices and faces out there into the world quite a bit, we're in a lot of trouble because now you can just clone it. Well, very quickly it's become clear that the tiniest amount of information, a single photograph and 30 seconds of audio, and you can be cloned. So there's kind of nowhere to run and hide. The other thing that goes away is security through obscurity, which people don't talk about quite enough. If it used to be the case that we are just producing so much data that you could kind of hide like a needle in a haystack, because you would have to know exactly which URL to look for this one website link. Now we can ask the computer a question like, find me every instance where John Popola said something that could sound like a fascist. And you got him! So all of that scares the hell out of me. So what's positive? Well, maybe the single biggest positive thing, frankly, is in the world of education. It has long been studied and understood that the fastest way for anyone to learn is to have a one-on-one instructor, to have a teacher who's right there with you, who's adapting to you and the level you're at and responding to your questions and suiting the answers to your level of understanding. Nothing comes close to that. Being in a classroom with 30 to 300 people doesn't cut it, barely does the job. We already almost have that with ChatGPT. And we will absolutely have it. We are going to have it almost already practically, but it is only going to get better and better to the point where all of us have in our pocket a robot that can teach us anything we want to learn and understand where we are in our understanding and tell us parables to help us understand it in ways that work for our unique interests. And that will be able to be made available to every human being on this planet. So AI could end illiteracy and usher in a world of knowledge and understanding, the likes of which humanity has never seen, the likes of which put the printing press to shame. And education's the issue I care about the most. I talk about it probably 1 out of 4 times in videos on this channel, and for good reason, because I think it is the key that unlocks everything. Education, not school, education. And I think AI can usher in and is already starting to usher in an educational golden age. And maybe it will help us help ourselves in dealing with the other problems that it creates. Thomas Sowell, who I think is maybe the most important modern economist and political philosopher of our times, has a phrase. It's a phrase that applies to our vote. It's a phrase that applies to every challenge we face. There are no solutions, only trade-offs. We don't get to have perfection. We don't get to achieve utopia. And the solutions that we think we're creating give rise to new problems. And so we are only ever making improvements at the margin and grappling with the fallout and the unintended consequences along the way. And one of the things about becoming an adult and putting some, putting some wear and tear on your shoes is realizing that that's the nature of life, that nothing's perfect, everything's messy, everything you think worked brought with it a bunch of stuff you didn't expect. And we've got to do the best we can. That's going to be true of this election. If you are nothing but elated for the election of Donald Trump, we should be wishing him and the administration the best. If he had lost, we should be wishing the other side the best. I am proud of Kamala Harris's handling of her concession. I think she did it with grace. Frankly, I think it was her best speech. Maybe she was relieved, but I think we as people who didn't agree with her should look to that and say, yes, good on you. That's what we should strive for. And now we should say, Mr. President, do the right thing. And when he's not, we shouldn't be afraid to say, what the hell are you doing? Get your act together. And with that, I will bid you a farewell. Thanks for showing up. Thanks for helping grow this channel into a real thing. We've got almost 250,000 subscribers, and I cherish every one of you. It's why, against the better judgment of many, you will find me mucking around in the comments, because I'm really honored that anybody would show up to what we're trying to do here and listen to me opine. And I hope you have a great weekend. And if you're watching and didn't vote for this guy and are scared, just know that if you think I'm a reasonable person, there are reasonable people out there that made the choice because we didn't think he was going to destroy the planet, destroy the world. And we're going to be okay. I truly believe that. I'm a father. I want to be a grandfather. I want us together to save America. And if we're going to do that, we have to want to. And that means everybody. We have to all want to live together in harmony. And here's hoping we can ironically look back and say, my gosh, things actually got a little better under that second term. I didn't think that was possible. Have a great weekend.